if you still remember, we have a skeptic friend na nagtanong sa atin kung sino ba yung nagsasabi na sa atheistic worldview daw, ang mga tao raw ay Moist robot. So, i-mention ko itong si Francis Crick. Kung saan sinabi niya, ito ay may kinalaman sa tinatawag niyang astonishing hypothesis. Sabi niya kasi, the astonishing hypothesis that you, tayo raw, your joys and your sorrows, your memories and your ambitions, your sense of personal identity and free will, are in fact no more than the behavior of a vast assembly of nerve cells and their associated molecules. So yan yung hypothesis ni Francis Crick.
So what if we are just made of molecules? Does that mean we are somehow less special? Yan ba ang point mo? Last I checked that the universe is made of matter and atoms. Why think of otherwise na hindi?
Alam nyo kasi, tingnan nyo, marami sa mga skeptic friends natin ang nag-assume na sila raw ang mga free-thinking beacons of reason. Pero sa kanilang worldview, walang tinatawag na kalayaan na makapamili o kalayaan na magpasya. That's why I always pointed out that if there
I am pointing out right now na you're equivocating the terms. The term free thinking just refers to a person who is free from dogma, while free will, that's something else. That is a metaphysical concept, as if there's such a thing, what we call free will. Just because merong word na free sa free thinking at sa free will, akala mo na they are the same. But no, they're not the same. Kaya you're equivocating two different concepts as if parehas lang sila.
worldview is true, humans were just Moist robots. Lagi ko pa nga kino-comment yan. Kahit alam ko na sasabihin ng ating mga kaibigan na, you are, anong tawag yung sinasabi? You are misinterpreting what we believe. Kaso, si Francis Crick na mismo ang nagsabi.
Did Francis Crick said that specifically na we are just Moist robots, or pinagtagpi mo lang ang logic mo para to arrive to that conclusion? Do you have a particular book na he quoted it?
Bukod dyan, isipin natin. Nung sinulat niya yan, yung sinabi niya kanina na doon sa kanyang sinabi na yung daw memories daw, lahat ng ito ay behavior lamang ng vast assembly of nerve cells and their associated molecules. Wait a minute. Bakit tayo maniniwala doon sa sinasabi niya kung ganun pala?
If that is the case, and if it is supported by science, then you have to accept the truth if you value truth the same way as I do. If that is the case, then that is the truth. No amount of wishful thinking will change the fact. Just imagine a scenario na you went to the doctor and later on you found out na meron kang cancer. Just because you don't like the news or finding ng doctor sa health mo, you can now ignore it because you don't like it. It doesn't change the facts na you still have cancer, no matter how you deny it.
Diba? The non-rational laws of physics determine everything he thinks and he writes. At kung tama si Francis Crick, well, wala po tayong matatawag na kalayaang magpasya. Tayo lamang ay mga Moist robots.
So what if wala tayong free will? We've been living in the world for thousands of years. Kahit na we believe na merong free will and later on found out, it's still not going to change the reality. Your God still does not exist. Kahit na if God exists, there will be no free will sa inyo, guys. If God is omniscient, in this case, God infinitely know all the states of affair. So if God knows all the state of affair, then wala ka ng free will. With the infinite knowledge of God, they're all necessarily true. For example, if God knew Ruel would do X, then it would be necessary for Ruel to do X because God already know this. God already have a knowledge about this, therefore it's necessarily true.
Ganun. We're not really reasoning, nagre-react lang tayo. Ibig sabihin, walang justification si Francis Crick na sabihin kung anong kanyang sasabihin. At wala tayong justification para paniwalaan yan. Si J.B.S. Haldane na isa ring atheist evolutionary biologist, kasi itong sabi niya, no, if my mental processes are determined wholly, W-H-O-L-L-Y, by the motions of atoms in my brain, I have no reason to suppose that my belief or my beliefs are true, and hence, I have no reason for supposing my brain to be composed of atoms. Kumbaga, he also has no reason to trust anything he believes. Kasama na mismo yung paniniwala na walang Diyos at iba pa. So, kung totoo yung mga pahayag niya ni Francis Crick and Haldane, yung worldview na yan, imposible na makapagbigay ka ng pangatwiran.
This is just so cheap and ignorant. Just because you don't want it to be the case, then mali na para sa'yo. Just because we live determinedly, it does not mean na hindi na tayo makakapag-reason. Just like a computer. Computer operation are deterministic in nature, but still they are rational in a sense na they use computer programming and logic to operate. I don't see any issue regarding sa pag-believing in a naturalistic view and being irrational. I don't see any incompatibility between them. Francis Crick and Professor Halden are good biologists, but they're not the only authority with regards about philosophy, especially in the metaphysics of free action. Ang tanong, bakit ka nag-assume that rationality cannot be part of a deterministic process, and concludes that we therefore could not hold true belief? Pero I'm curious, how do you justify this in your imaginary worldview?
Kasama na yung agham. Sabi nga ni C.S. Lewis, unless human reasoning is valid, no science can be true. So sige,
Well, what can I expect from C.S. Lewis? He is a good story writer but a terrible philosopher and logician. Lewis' claim is self-defeating. Unless human reasoning is valid, then any human reasoning, including this one, is not true. So if we accept this, then human reasoning is indeed valid.
sabihin natin na sila ay masasabi natin ng mga marurunong, matatalino. Okay, fine. Okay, fine. Kaso nga lang, hindi po nila ma-justify yung kanilang mga claim. Like, there is no God, Jesus did not rise from the dead, Christians are ganito at ganyan. Wala pong matatawag na justification. Bakit? Kasi if their worldview is true, we were just most robots. That's it.
So, anong connection? Kahit na ang ChatGPT is a robot and yet still was able to create a valid and coherent point. So what if we are just moist robots in our worldview kahit na ang kabobohan na ito is a straw man? How does your imaginary failed Christian worldview solve this?
Because in order to construct any valid argument for, let's say, atheism, the atheist has to steal immaterial tools from God's universe. Because no such tools exist in the robot world of their worldview.
Kagi ang bobo nga. Anong immaterial tools ang pinagsasabi mo? Do you mean concepts? And ano yung mga concepts na matatagpuan lang in your worldview? And how are you sure na wala sa robot worldview namin and can only be found in your imaginary worldview? And how are you sure na wala sa robot worldview namin and can only be found in your imaginary worldview?
Gayon pa man sa mga Kristiyano, we have an ultimate explanation for our ability to reason. Alam niyo yung logic? Alam niyo yung John 1:1? In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Logic is rooted in the nature of God. And we can understand reality because God has endowed our minds with the ability to do so. So therefore, kaya nga laging natin pinipinpoint, only Christianity makes sense in reality.
Bobo nga. What are you claiming is not even tugma sa realidad. Just because you have a story about rationality, it does not mean na that is the correct and only explanation. What does that even mean na logic is rooted in the nature of God? In what sense do you mean by that, by the way? Do you mean God's nature is logical? Because that would be very problematic for you. Or do you mean logic is God's nature? So whatever your God's nature is, that is logic. Now the question is, does your God have this nature because they are logical? Or is it that they are logical because they are God's nature? Now the most important question is, does your God have control over his nature or not? So in essence, your worldview is nowhere near certainty, because your rational faculties are under the whims of a being. What was given can also be taken by your God. So right now, what is your guarantee that you're reasoning as it should be, without using the very same thing that you're given by your imaginary God? In this case, it seems to be you're stealing from our worldview.
Kaya nga, if kumbaga kung titingnan natin, Yung sinasabi ng John 1:1, in the beginning was the Word. Yung Greek word na binanggit dito ni Apostle John ay ang salitang logos. Na doon nagmula yung salitang logic o lohika. And since Jesus is equal with the Father in nature and essence, and Jesus is the embodiment of God's knowledge, natural lamang sa mga mananampalatayang Kristiyano na magiging lohikal sa kanilang pananaliksik.
Etymology is not the same as definition. Definitions are based on the usage of the word, not where they came from. Logos means reason or word, but based sa Bible ninyo, the usage seems to be indicating word, not reason, in the sense of a logical inference or rationality. Right now, you are equivocating two different concepts, the logos in logic and logos as word, as depicted sa Bible mo. Now, you are making a theological claim using John 1:1, but that does not mean it automatically be true. And that's the whole new claim, invoking Jesus as God from that Bible verse, which, by the way, a misinterpretation according to the majority of the biblical scholars. At just because you believe in this story because of your dogma, it does not follow that you are being logical. Huwag kang asyumero.
With the Father in nature and essence, and Jesus is the embodiment of God's knowledge, natural lamang sa mga mananampalatayang Kristiyano na magiging lohikal sa kanilang pananaliksik. In fact, yan po yung ginamit ng mga mananampalatayang Kristiyano, especially when it comes on discovering many things, kasama na po yung agham. So, kung bibigyan natin ito ng pagbubulay-bulay, mamamangha talaga tayo na grabe pala ang gawa ng Diyos sa ating buhay at maging sa buhay ng mga tao na kapaligid sa atin. Why? Because it is Christ Himself who is the embodiment of God's knowledge.
What the? Now you're just claiming that science used John 1:1 to conduct scientific studies? Now this is just becoming a joke. And Jesus being the embodiment of God's knowledge? Keep on imagining, bro, that your claims are true. When can you back it up with evidence instead of repeating the claims in the Bible?
But if God doesn't exist, how can we explain our freedom to decide, and also laws of logic, mathematics, and even what we feel or anything? Kasi let's get clear here. Lahat ng mga nangyayari sa kasaysayan ay, although pwede may paliwanag ito ng agham, pero hindi ito kayang ipaliwanag lahat-lahat.
Appeal to ignorance, boy. An unfalsifiable explanation. Just because you gave a so-called explanation, that does not mean that it is correct. At how does invoking a magical claim in your explanation makes it better? Science can explain many things except with your magical claims because science does not deal with imaginary things like magic na binibenta mo. Just because you are dealing with magical claim, it does not mean science will have to deal with it. Tell me this. How does pretending to know everything really explains anything at all?
So, if Christianity is true, then masasabi natin na may sense ang buhay. Well, it's up to you who will go to decide.
If your dogma is true, then you can prove it. And guys, think rationally.